Namaste India and Namaste rest of the world. We welcome you back to another episode from the Dekho Apna Desh series that we are bringing to you from the Ministry of Tourism, Government of India. Today, in fact, marks a very, very special week for us. We are starting a series of webinars because we are marking the 74th Independence Day for our great country, which shall be on the 15th of August 2020. Aren't we so very proud to be a part of this great land? And we are so, I think in so many ways so blessed to be born in a country that has been living through so many thousands of millennia and has been bringing into her fold so many different cultures, heritage, religions, foods, people, their stories, and there's just so much else. It's a fascinating journey. So keep tuned with us in the Dekho Apna Desh webinar series, because every single time, not only do we try and bring you different aspects which are directly related to tourism, but there are so many experiences. And that's how this week is going to be for you. Today, we start with 1857. It's always very hard, viewers, to pick up a subject when you're talking about independence as to which is that point. When do we say that we started the process of aggressively moving towards re-owning our land back for ourselves? It's not easy to pick, but then you have to pick a point. And so that's why we picked 1857. It could be a culmination of sentiments that were gathering. It would be an expression of what was to come in the times that moved on. So take it as that. But we take 1857 as a point where a lot of people in a certain region started to give a ferment, a more vociferous ferment. And we are going to walk through some interesting cities where these people were and how they were able to bring alive the passion of thousands and lakhs of Indians at that point of time. We are going to go through the trail today with two people who started the journey of Dekho Apna Desh webinar series on 14th of April, and they are an important part of the journey of this program. Dr. Shomi Roy and Nidhi Bansal, thank you for joining us again today. We started a journey and we thought it was appropriate, therefore, to start the journey of this week with you also.
Thank you, ma'am.
It's always a pleasure to listen to you and the setup, I should say. I don't want to say company, it's a setup. It's an effort that Shomi and Nidhi are spearheading India City Walks. And India City Walks is not just a walk, it actually walks you through everything that India is. They're walking us through 28 different cities in India, and they're going to keep doing many more. In fact, they are looking at all of you to join them and to showcase your cities also as we go along, showing you the Dekho Apna Desh webinars. Well, viewers, today, Saturday, and this time it's not going to be the next Saturday. As I said, this is a series. We're going to walk you through Andamans. Why? We shall know that on Monday. We are going to take you to Jallianwala Bagh, which is in Amritsar. We're also going to do some very lesser known stories, because India's independence is not just about a few people, it's our journey. All of us who were there at that point of time are a part of that journey. And for all of us who are there today, the journey continues. We have to make our country more strong. We have to make it more resurgent. We have to make our place on the globe far more than where we are. And that's where I will tell you a lot more about things that we need to do as the current generation. But for now, I'm going to pass the screen to Nidhi to kickstart today's webinar and also to kickstart this week, which is so very special for us.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. Good morning to all our viewers. Our country stands as a testament to the victory over colonial tyranny, the sacrifice of our freedom fighters, the immense contribution made by the women nationalists, the participation of the young and the old brought us our freedom on 15th of August, 1947. Though the road to independence was filled with obstacles, our nation came together. Our leaders showed us the path. The first war of independence was fought in 1857 And the string of events kept following till we attained complete independence in 1947. Celebrating the theme of India's independence, India City Walks presents the webinar with holistic history events and tourism perspective. The saga of independence and the revolt of 1857 can be revisited through the monuments and buildings that bore the brunt of it or came as a result of it. From Delhi to Kanpur, Meerut to Lucknow, and many other cities across the country, this webinar tells you the story of valor, sacrifice, and bravery. Beginning our session today with an event that took place almost 100 years after the Battle of Plassey, which was held in 1757, when the British East India Company had already brought major portions of the country under its control. A revolt, an uprising, a war that brought a blow to the British rule in India, that nearly shattered the dreams of the East India Company for mass expansion. This was the year 1857, a saga that we will be sharing with you today. Before we get into the details, we have to mention that the events are overlapping and simultaneous. Each leader, each cantonment, and each region have their own stories and versions to the event. To understand the complexities, each of the historic episodes can take multiple hours. I give it over to Dr. Shomi Roy to share with us a few markers of the significant year of 1857.
Before we bring the episodes of each passing day and month of 1857 alive to you, let us first note a few reasons that created an environment of distress and anger amongst the people. What we are sharing is not an exhaustive list, and there were actually many more factors which led to the revolt. Different schools of historians have argued that the revolt cannot be seen in isolation from the other voices of dissent that rose in the various parts of our country. Nonetheless, major reasons of the revolt can be broadly classified into political, social, economic, religious, and military factors. Let us quickly take a look at the few reasons. So, for example, the introduction of unfair policies like the policy of trade and commerce, the policy of indirect subordination through subsidiary alliance, the policy of war and annexation, the policy of direct subordination through doctrine of lapse, policy of misgovernance in which Awadh was annexed. All of this greatly hampered the interest of the rulers of the native states, and they one by one became victims of British expansion. Therefore, those rulers who lost their states were naturally against the British and took sides against them during the revolt. We all know about the extent of economic exploitation by the East India Company. To name some of the land revenue settlements, say for example, the permanent settlement, the Mehelwari settlement, the Royatwari settlement, all crushing the hopes of any economic stability. One of the factors in the barracks was, of course, the salary disparity amongst the soldiers of Indian and English origin, and of course, the racial arrogance of the British that created social anomalies. One factor to another, the reasons are never enough to understand the deep-rooted sentiments of our freedom fighters. Let us begin with the course of what is popularly has been referred as the revolt, mutiny, uprising, or the Indian War of Independence in 1857. Now, some believe that the events of 1857 started mysteriously with the Chapati movement. Yes, you heard it right. It's called the Chapati movement. In the times when there were no social networking sites like today, for example, the Facebook, Instagram, or WhatsApp, the time when most communication channels were under the English rule, our people devised something unique, very, very unique. And how unique was it? Let's understand that from a quote by Dr. Gilbert Haddo, an army surgeon working under the East India Company, and he wrote the following lines in a letter to his sister in Britain. This is March 1857, and I quote, "There is a mysterious affair going on throughout the whole of India at present. No one seems to know the meaning of it. It is not known where it originated, by whom or what purpose, whether it is supposed to be connected to any religious ceremony or whether it has to do with something with a secret society. The Indian papers are full of surmises as to what it means. It is called the Chapati movement, unquote. Thousands of unmarked chapatis were distributed to homes and police outposts throughout India by runners at night. And the people who accepted the offering would quietly make more batches and pass them on. Just imagine how intriguing this entire scenario would be for most of the people. However, recent studies have theorized that the circulation of chapatis may have been an attempt to just deliver food to people afflicted with cholera. However, nonetheless, in the face of inconclusive evidence, it can only be said that the chapatis were a form of secret weapon and they did what they had to. Amidst all of this, there is this one incident that happened, an episode that added fuel to the fire. This was the greased cartridge episode. I'm sure most of our viewers have heard about it, but still we have to mention it. In the English regiments, it was being speculated that the new set of cartridges had animal fat on them, which the soldiers were expected to tear with their teeth. This was surely not acceptable for the various religious sects that were within the army. On March 29th, 1857, on parade ground at Barakpur, a sepoy, the English way of referring to a soldier, named Mangal Pandey, fired the first shot of the revolt. His unit in Bengal army, which had refused to use the new rifle cartridge, was about to be disarmed and punished. Pandey rebelled. He rebelled by shooting the British officials. In altercation, Pandey was surrounded by British troops. He survived a shot and was put on trial, hanged on April 8, 1857. Mangal Pandey's voice of dissent had now started to echo in various regiments across the country. They say it was 10th of May, 1857, when the actual revolt began. Quoting again from a personal memoir of an English officer, and I quote, "It was 7 in the evening, but the intense heat had the congregation sweating in their Sunday finery. The women, elegantly clad in Victorian gowns, and the men in their suits, wiped their perspiring faces even as the service began. The date was May 10th, 1857. The place was Meerut. This incident was to herald the rise of the sepoys that managed to shake the British Raj out of complacency. The evening service, which usually started at 6:30, had been postponed by half an hour, maybe due to the trouble that had been rumbling within the cantonment for the past few days. The day went down as the beginning of a rising that later came to be known as Sepoy Mutiny by the British," unquote. After Meerut, it was time to march ahead and ensure a suitable leadership for the revolt. It is accounted that the revolutionary, after all that happened in Meerut, traveled approximately 50 miles from Meerut to Delhi, and soon the large city erupted in violence against the English. A number of British civilians in the city were able to flee, but many were, of course, slaughtered. For the first time in history, the frail Mughal ruler was seen and proclaimed as a ruler of the Indian contingent. They asked Bahadur Shah Zafar to be the patron and wanted to fight under his patronage against the British. Bahadur Shah Zafar was old and he was now proclaimed just as a symbolic ruler. In the meantime, as a symbol of power and identity, it was absolutely critical. It was absolutely necessary to save Delhi and Bahadur Shah Zafar from the hands of the English. To ensure safety, the unsung hero Raja Nahar Singh of Ballabgarh reached out with his troops on 16th May 1857. He stationed them at the eastern and southern borders of Delhi, and it is said that almost for 120 days, Delhi remained safe in his hands. Imagine, for 120 days, this man with his troops safeguarded Delhi from the hands of the English Empire. With the ruler on their side, the revolt spread like a wildfire. With major parts of northwest frontiers, the central India, some parts of east and south, this revolt had just begun. On the slide, what you see is just a minor part of the spread where the revolt spread across, and the shadow of it, of course, kept following. We spoke about how Delhi, as a seat of power, saw the reign of Bahadur Shah Zafar. While Delhi was being safeguarded by Raja Nahar Singh, the outskirts saw ensuing episodes of the revolt. From the neighboring Hindon, the fierce battle was fought on 30th and 31st May 1857 between the British forces and the local soldiers. The fire of dissent, mutiny, revolt, or war had just begun and was spreading without any limitation. The flames were now witnessed in Jhansi, Lucknow, and Kanpur. The siege in Lucknow has been etched in the pages of history. Yes, we have moved to Lucknow now. And there was this prolonged defense of the residency complex within the city of Lucknow during the revolt. It went on for almost 6 months, from May 25th till November 1857. No matter how many records say that it was just for the few weeks that the revolt happened, you cannot rely, because here again, it shows minimum of 6 months just for the siege of Lucknow. After 2 successive relief attempts had reached the city, the defenders and the civilians were evacuated from residency, which was then abandoned. This episode showed the strength of the Indian side had. This episode sent the message loud and clear that they were here for a much larger goal of independence. Close to Delhi, the Battle of Badli Ki Sarai led to decisive turn of events. The battle began on June 8th. The sepoys fought and did everything that they could have done to stop the British forces to storm into the city of Delhi. At the initial stage, the Indian troops were on the winning side. But unfortunately, they could not hold the post for very long. The situation was neither a win nor a defeat, as both sides saw a gory side of a battle. However, this gave the British a passage to head towards further north of Delhi. They paved the way to reach out to the northern ridge of Delhi, to establish their base, to take Delhi under their control. What you see on the slide is a marker of the 2 camps. The red portion on the top was under the British base in Northern Ridge, and what you see as the bordered region was the walled city of Shahjahanabad, the one with golden and green. To ensure that Delhi is taken, the British forces had to storm the walled city, break through the gates, the walls, and capture the titular King Bahadur Shah Zafar. But for now, Delhi yet again was safe. Raja Nahar Singh was there to safeguard it, as the seat of power was untouched. However, the neighboring cantonments needed attention, so let's move to the other parts of the country for now. Jhansi and Kanpur were witnessing similar string of events, and when we speak of 1857, the few names that comes repeatedly in our minds are, of course, Rani Lakshmi Bai, Tatya Tope, Nana Sahib, the famous trio. In the interest of keeping this narrative simple, we should only share with you the highlight events as led by these leaders, but the stories are many, of course. Apart from these names, some of the prominent names that one should mention are of Bakht Khan, Kunwar Singh, Pirjis Kadir, Begum Hazrat Mahal, and many more. We spoke about Lucknow, and it is equally important for us to share with you what happened in Kanpur. The siege of Kanpur, and yes, that's the spelling, the way it was spelled back in those years. The siege of Kanpur was a key episode in the revolt. The besieged company forces and civilians in Kanpur were underprepared and for an extended siege, and surrendered to the revolutionary forces under Nana Sahib. In return, they were assured a safe passage to Allahabad. However, the evacuation from Kanpur actually turned into a massacre, and most of the men were killed. As the East India Company rescue forces from Allahabad approached Kanpur, British citizens were captured and killed, and which came to be known later as the Bibi Khar massacre. The remains were thrown down in nearby well in an attempt to hide the evidence. Following the recapture of Kanpur and the discovery of massacre, the angry company forces engaged in widespread retaliation and captured soldiers and local civilians. If accounts of these episodes are to be believed, there were hundreds who lost their lives. This still remains one of the horrific incidents that shook the British in a manner that chilled them to the bones. Now, coming back again to Delhi, 85 days have gone by since Raja Nahar Singh was safeguarding Delhi from the siege. British forces were quietly stationed at the northern ridge. They were still planning, plotting, and looking for the right time to attack. From 16th May, it was now 8th of August. It was the same day as today, 8th of August, when the English troops at Northern Ridge saw a new leader. That was a new leash of life for the English troops. August 8th, 1857 was the date when General Nicholson was called to save Delhi from the revolutionaries. With his additional troops, he entered Delhi royally at the peak of the revolt to solidify the British position on the ridge. Who was Nicholson, and how did his posting actually change the fate of Delhi? Well, he had recently tasted success in resisting the skirmishes in Punjab province with a force of approximately 1,600 infantry, 450 cavalry, 16 horse artillery guns. Nicholson defeated the Indians at the Battle of Najafgarh. Since then, he have been given the epithet of a hero. The final face-off in Delhi had now begun. 120 days from when Raja Nahar Singh guarded Delhi, the city had now begun to crumble. It was 11th September 1857, and I would like to read an excerpt from a personal account. I'm quoting now. It was 5 p.m., and even though the sun was setting, the heat of the riot was on the rise. And for the citizens of Shahjahanabad, it was every man for himself. The river of blood and carnage was boiling, loot and plunder raged. No one knew what was happening to anyone else. A prayer for peace was on everyone's lips when suddenly there was a tremendous noise. And even if 1,000 cannons had been fired, their noise would not have been so loud. The Kashmiri Gate is from Shah Jahan's period, and its walls are 4 feet wide. After this noise, dirt and mud started falling from the walls, and everyone was covered in dust. The earth shook as if there had been an earthquake. Unquote. Shahjahanabad was taken. The Mughal throne had fallen. General Nicholson was gravely injured. The aftermath of the siege could be seen in every street of the walled city. There was darkness, there was gloom. It was a collective loss of power and prestige. General Nicholson had won. However, he did not live long to see the capital under the English rule. He breathed his last on 23rd September, just when Delhi had fallen. During this siege, the titular king, Bahadur Shah Zafar, who was old and frail, had taken refuge at the Humayun's tomb. He, along with his family, were arrested from the tomb and brought back to their seat of power, I should say the erstwhile seat of power, to Red Fort, where his judicial trial began, and his trial went on till 9th of March 1858. From 1857, we have already covered a year, and it is now the year 1858. In the meantime, our warriors in Jhansi and Gwalior and many other adjoining places were still fighting. The Battle of Betwa River or the Kalpi are just a few names to mention. Tatia Tope and Rani Lakshmi Bai fought fierce battles and kept the flame of the revolt ignited till they could, say about till June 1858. Gradually, the flame diminished. Throughout 1857, 1858, sporadic events were recorded across the nation. The revolt had left a deep scar in the minds of the English. They just could not believe something of this nature could have jolted their supremacy. There was a huge loss of life and material wealth. The voices of defense and dissent could be heard in every corner. The English regime all of a sudden could not find a strong ground to rule. Hence, it was decided that the power dynamics should change. In this direction, the Queen issued a proclamation on 1st November 1858 stating that India was now directly under her leadership. The mediating East India Company was now removed from the helm of power. The transfer of authority from the company to the crown had taken place. But the last nail in the coffin was when Bahadur Shah Zafar was sent to Rangoon on exile. On 4th December 1858, Bahadur Shah Zafar with Zeenat Mahal boarded the steamship for Rangoon. The destination was, of course, revealed only when they boarded the ship. This is where we come to an end of the stories. Of course, sporadic events kept taking place, and there are many, many layers of this story that could have been shared. In the interest of time, it is now important for us to move into the present day times. Let us move on to the different parts of our country, which gets us a sneak peek into the remains of 1857. Over to Nidhi ma'am for the first present day, 8th of August, 2020.
Years have gone by, but even today, the year 1857 means one of the most decisive periods of Indian history. Till now, we have shared with you some of the significant episodes of the year 1857, 1858, and 59. Trust me when I say this, that there are hundreds of books, another hundreds of articles, thousands of interpretations, images. There is no dearth of information on this subject. You ask for a story and everyone has a version to it. What we have shared with you today is a popular version of the events. But amidst all of this, if there is something that remains constant, then those are our monuments that witnessed the episodes of 1857. Today, we are sharing with you the popular trail of 1857, which has been delivered many times in the past. Walk with us as we take you through some of the prominent remnants across the country. In months to come, when we start stepping out again, a trail like this can surely be enjoyed and experienced to relive the memories of the past. For now, let's explore it virtually. Let us start from where it all began, Barrackpore. The place is known for its cantonment areas even today. Many of you will resonate this name from the movie Mangal Pandey, The Rising. Barrackpore has one of the largest bases of Indian Air Force called the 6th Wing. Ahead of the cantonment area, we have the Mangal Pandey Park and Mangal Pandey Cenotaph to commemorate the sacrifice of the martyr. Moving on, from Barrackpore, we are directly heading to Gwalior, one of the places that held its fort absolutely safe and strong for a very long period of time during the revolt. During that period, the fort saw great warfare. Rani Lakshmi Bai came fighting from Jhansi to Gwalior and sought shelter inside the fort. She fought against the British till her last strength. In a long drawn battle where she sacrificed her life by jumping from the fort on her horse, leaving us with a picture of her bravery and valor. To commemorate her sacrifice, we can also visit the Samadhi Sthal of Rani Lakshmi Bai. When they say, "Khoob ladi mardani, wo to Jhansi wali Rani thi," your eyes, your heart swells up thinking of what bravery and sacrifice means when you fight for your country. The legends of Rani Lakshmi Bai brings us to Jhansi, a small town in Uttar Pradesh. Anyone who has love for the subject would always be fascinated by the name and the legends of this place. We head towards our first pit stop, which is Jhansi Fort. The fort has stood standstill and witnessed the attacks by the English troops. A recent Bollywood movie showed some bits and pieces of the life of Rani Lakshmi Bai. A session is not enough to share with you the account of Lakshmi Bai and her struggle. But the fort has seen it all. A visit on the hilltop and listening to the stories will surely bring shivers down your spine. I must share with you here that one of the lesser known facts about the Rani is that she was called Manikarnika before her marriage, and that she was born in Varanasi. In fact, sometimes when time permits, we even add Varanasi to the trail, as there is a park that is dedicated to Rani Lakshmi Bai in Varanasi. Moving on, our next stop in Jhansi is the Jhansi Cantonment Cemetery or the British Cemetery. It is not one of the easiest places to locate. You will need our help to find it. Nonetheless, the place has some of the memories and memorial plaques listing the lost lives from 1857. Every time I mention dates and months, it's all relevant from the year of 1857. From Jhansi, we are now heading to our next destination. We are reaching the city of Nawabs, Lucknow. The city has many places in the list to visit and relive the accounts of 1857. With each site, it opens a new chapter to understand the events within the city and its repercussions across the northern belt. We begin our trail in Lucknow with the Residency complex. The Residency was one of the most prominent sites related to the revolt of 1857. The house of the British residents and other important officials, the Residency campus was captured by the Indian soldiers. Shomi has spoken about the history part, and hence I'm not going to repeat it. But when you visit this place, you cannot stop yourself from actually sitting down to listen to every factual detail of the events. The characters come to life. The stories become absolutely vivid. Such is the visual impression that the site creates. Our next stop in Lucknow is the famous La Martiniere College. This beautiful architectural marvel has layers of history hidden within its multiple folds. It is said that during the string of events in 1857, the principal, the teachers, and the boys from here played a very integral and important role, which is perhaps unique in the pages of history. They defended an extremely exposed part of the southern perimeter of the Residency. They withstood infantry, artillery attacks, and were subject to mining operations. Very intense moments can be relived when you visit this place. The accounts of Lucknow are incomplete if we do not mention General Havelock. He is the same person after whom initially the Havelock Island was named in Andaman and Nicobar Island. Now, of course, the island has been renamed as Swaraj by our Honorable Prime Minister. You will be hearing a lot more about this in the next webinar, which is on prisons. Sir Havelock was one of the prime architects of the events in Lucknow, whose memorial is also a site for our visits. Next in Lucknow is the Alambagh Palace. The garden here was occupied by the freedom fighters who converted it into a military post and held this place till September. The immense area is also a witness to the fierce battle fought between the Indians and the British. Unfortunately, the present day scenario isn't very pleasant. However, the stories, they make up for the lost legacy. While the garden and the pavilion have not survived, the gateway still exists here. This was the spot where the British breached, walls are marked. There's also a memorial here, so it's a must visit. The last but not the least place on Lucknow to visit is where the siege was brought to an end. When you visit the Tilkusha Palace, you get to experience the English side of the story. Sir Colin Campbell, the British commander-in-chief, had converted this into his headquarters. The siege of Lucknow was finally ended by his troops in November. However, the commander-in-chief again used Dilkusha in March of 1858 when making the final assault upon Lucknow. With this closed chapter in Lucknow, we head towards a new page in Kanpur. A city with multiple episodes, numerous versions, and some must-visit places. This is what makes Kanpur unique on our list of places. The first site in Kanpur is the Memorial Church or the All Souls Cathedral. Located in the cantonment area, this is one of the best preserved sites. This includes the Wheelers' entrenchment, memorial railing and cross, graves of British officials, and marble tablets with the names of almost 1,000 Britishers who died in the revolt. As permission is required to enter the church, the site doesn't seat too many visitors. A quiet walk here can surely leave you with daunting afterthoughts about the revolt. With this note, let's move on to our next pit stop. The story behind this slide and the next has been shared by Shomi elaborately. This is the Nana Rao Park. This was originally the premises of Bibi Ghar. This place used to have a well where many bodies were dumped during the revolt. However, the well is now covered. The site is well known due to the statue and is visited by many people. Closely related to Bibi Ghar massacre is the incident of the Sati Chaura Ghat. So let's move there as our next location. The Sati Chaura Ghat was historically extremely significant as it witnessed Nana Sahib's leadership and victory. The stories of sacrifice here are countless. But unfortunately, at present, this place has no signage to indicate the incident, and the dilapidated ghat is used by washermen to wash and dry their clothes. Nonetheless, we still can visit this place just to understand the entire turn of events during the revolt. With this, we are now moving on to once the capital of the Mughals, the city of Agra, a place which attracts innumerable number of tourists to visit the seventh wonder of the world, one of the wonders of the world, the Taj Mahal, and of course, the UNESCO World Heritage Site, Agra Fort. It is interesting to note that Agra has the other side of the story too. With the string of colonial structures in the Kant area, some of the structures are as old as the revolt of 1857. If you wish to revisit the events in Agra, then there are two must-visit places. First up is the Agra Fort. Apart from its Mughal history, it is fascinating to understand its connection with 1857. Some locals believe that the Agra Fort was the scene of self-inflicted imprisonment of 6,000 British residents and the Battle of Agra. Also, the Diwane Am holds the grave of John Russell Colvin, who was the Lieutenant Governor of the Northwest Province of India, who also died in 1857. The next important structure is the Agra College, which you see on your slide as well. The library is one of the oldest colleges in India. It was built in 1830. However, it got burned down in July of the year 1857, as it was owned by the British government. When we mention all this, it is just the tip of the iceberg as far as the colonial history in Agra is concerned. There is much, much, much more in the city, and you will need a lot of time to visit all the other places. Moving closer to Delhi, we have now reached Meerut. This is where it all began in an organized way in May, on actually 10th May, 1857. Let us now take a look at the surviving structures in the city which speak about the revolt. We will first visit St. John's Church and Cemetery. It has preserved its records of services and burials since 1857. In a dark corner of the church lies a marble plaque commemorating the family of soldier named William who fought the battle. This is just an example to many others. Another forgotten reminder of the revolt is St. John's Cemetery, where at least 9 Britishers who died in the revolt are buried, and there are many, many others. Many Britishers come here looking for their ancestors. And trust me, it is extremely intriguing to see people tracing their lineage through the cemeteries and church proceedings. With this, we are now going to move to the parade ground in Meerut itself. Turning the pages of history, on April 24th, 85 soldiers of the 3rd Bengal Light Cavalry, they refused to use the cartridges. On 9th May, they were court-martialed at the parade ground, handcuffed to humiliate them. On May 10th, Bengal Army assembled in Meerut and attacked their commanding officers. And this is where it all began. In 2004, the Cantonment Board put up a historical work. Today, nothing much remains except of what you see on the slide. We are now inching towards the seat of power, Delhi. But before we enter, there are 2 sites which one could visit. As Shomi has mentioned, the remnants from the Battle of Hindon and the Badli Ki Sarai. The pictures of the remains are captured here on the slide for you. We have finally entered Delhi. Delhi's 1857 experience can take you an entire day and a little more than that to explore. The trail can be divided into 2 halves as there are many, many sites to visit. Listed on the slide are places that make the experience holistic. Let us begin with the Northern Ridge Trail first. Our first stop is the Vice Regal Lodge, currently known as the VC's office. The absolutely stunning structure is quite strictly prohibited. What you see on the slide is, of course, a contemporary version, new structure, which was built in 1902. Prior to that, it was said that it used to be the circuit house within the British cantonment area. Moving towards the other side of the road, a far prominent structure is the Flagstaff Tower. It was built in 1828 as a signal tower for the then cantonment and was placed at a high point on the ridge. Yet again, a place which witnessed the harrowing episodes of 1857 in this part of the city. As mentioned before, the Northern Ridge is dotted with such monuments and many, many, many stories. A little walk inside the ridge area, following the signages behind the shrubs and bushes, tucked away in a corner is the Khuni Jheel. According to local tales, this is one of the sites where the bodies were dumped and the water of the Jheel had turned all red, giving it its name, the Khuni Jheel. Of course, now the water is all green and the place is well barricaded. You will need some assistance to find this place. If I have to really mention, I must mention here that you have to be extremely careful of the monkeys at the ridge. While they cause no harm, of course, you've got to be a little cautious of not threatening them. Let us now move towards the main road and hit our next stop. The Hindu Rao House used to be the British Army headquarters during the revolt. Today, this building is used as a hospital. This would be one of the pit stops, which has lots of stories ranging from different times and also some stories related to the jinns. Our final stop in the Northern Ridge Trail is the Mutiny Memorial, a memorial that was built in 1863 by the Britishers in the memory of the soldiers of the Delhi Field Force who were killed in the revolt. After independence, it was converted to the memorial for Indian soldiers and opened on 15th August of 1972. It was then renamed as Ajitgarh. We are now going to move to the second half of the story, the Kashmiri Gate Trail. Kashmiri Gate, as we mentioned in the earlier slides, the storming of this gate marked the fall of the Mughal Empire. This place is now under ASI. It has the last remains of the wall, a small manicured lawn, and a descriptive plaque. The story of the trail starts from here. A few steps ahead, it is the magnanimous St. James Church, a massive light yellow colored structure. It is a functional church and is one of the must-visit places of Delhi. This place is also known as Skinner's Church. The copper ball and the cross on the top, which are said to be a replica of the church in Venice, were damaged during the revolt and were later replaced. Moving on towards the other side, we have the Nicholson Cemetery. I don't think I have to mention a lot about Nicholson. I think Shomi covered it extensively. Nicholson was buried here after he succumbed to his injuries in September. You will be surprised to know the number of visitors and the number of tourists who actually visit this place. Next on the trail is the British Magazine. This is right opposite the Ambedkar University, and it's located right in the middle of the Lothian Road in front of the post office. And the two structures are called the British Magazine. It was a fortified building and was used to store the ammunition for the British troops. And it came under the Indian soldiers on May 11th. Today, this is how the structure looks like. Moving on the trail, we have now reached the Telegraph Memorial. As the name suggests, this was built to commemorate the loyal and the devoted services of the Delhi Telegraph Office staff in the eventful 11th May of 1857. Our final pit stop while exiting the walled city would be the Khuni Darwaza, a monument on the Bahadur Shah Zafar Marg, where the three sons of the last Mughal king, Bahadur Shah Zafar, were killed by the British intelligence officer, William Hodgson. This marks the closure of the trail as far as some of the prominent monuments are concerned. However, there are many more stories, characters, monuments which can be relived through our museums. Every time I speak on this trail or speak about this trail, my heart is full of emotions and patriotism. A list of some of the museums dedicated to the revolt of 1857 are mentioned here. Of these, the museums recently inaugurated at the Red Fort complex are undoubtedly one of the best. The lesser known and quaint ones are, of course, the Kala Pani Museum and the regional museums in the cities. The Kala Pani Museum and the Kala Pani thing is definitely, as I mentioned earlier, is going to be spoken much more in detail on the 10th. Not all of us are history buffs or avid readers. So here is a slide, and on the next slide, we have listed some of the all-time classics, which were inspired by some true and some fictionalized events of the revolt of 1857. Victoria and Abdul is a recent release and is available on Netflix. It's highly fictionalized, so please watch it with a pinch of salt. Manikarnika, of course, I spoke about it earlier as well. It shows us the life and stories of Rani Lakshmi Bai. Again, a periodic film drama. Watch it after reading a disclaimer. And yes, with that, we have come to the fag end of the presentation. Here are just names of places where the revolt showed its sparks and places which can still be covered on the trail. Each have some story, some connect to the first war of India's independence. We are pleased to showcase India's past in the form of tourism, India Discovery Product, Memoirs of 1857, a prelude to independence. We hope you liked it. There are several permutation combinations on which these itineraries are created, both for the guest and trade partners. We are on a mission to deliver India Discovery itineraries as real-life experiences with an intent to create higher value, sustainability, and especially an increase in national and international visibility to enhance India's tourism opportunity. Once travel returns, we will be pleased to offer safer, secure India's freedom-related experiences and share stories of valor, sacrifice, and bravery. I also take the opportunity to mention about our flagship brands, especially India with Locals, India Heritage Walks, Storytellers of India, and the City Walks Festival, which should be coming in soon, as a platform for individuals to join and become entrepreneurs in the tourism sector. Our community impact, Seva Cultural Heritage Foundation, is creating employment opportunities in the sector of heritage and tourism, giving impetus to the cultural engagements among the citizens. We will continue to tell stories, and we thank the Ministry of Tourism for such a distinguished platform. Jai Hind, Vande Mataram. Thank you very much once again. Over to ADG ma'am, please.
Thank you, Nidhi, and thank you, Shami. Viewers, if you are logged in from India and are an Indian, isn't your heart already swelling with pride that we had people before us who did so much to create where we are today? We wouldn't be where we are if they had not done what they did when they did. But then that also reminds me that when we sit here today in the present, should we not be doing something that is mentioned from that point, 100 or 150 years from now? Whoever sits at that point of time, should he or she not be saying the same for us? Viewers, value adding to your country never stops. As we mentioned in the beginning, that was only a beginning, and it's a continuum. And taking over the point from where Nidhi said about the entrepreneurship, we've been talking about to you about the IITFC, as we call it, the Incredible India Tourist Facilitator Certification Program. We've been encouraging you to join that. It's an online program run by the Ministry of Tourism. This is the purpose. The purpose is that all of you have a story. All of you have a knowledge about your incredible India, the way you live it, the way you see it. Why don't we join the program, become a certified facilitator, and bring that beautiful neighborhood with all its stories laced in to people who come to your area? So I once again, through this platform, encourage all of you to join that program. But before I move on to saying more, I have somebody coming in to say the value of the program, telling us a little about, she's a young viewer, and she wanted to say something on how she felt value added through these webinars. I'm going to ask Ms. Sumegha Sugandh to just share her sentiment about it.
Hello, ma'am.
Hi, Sumegha. Welcome to Dekho Apna Desh.
Thank you so much, ma'am. So viewers, I hope my video is visible. I'm not too sure because...
Yes, it is. Carry on.
So viewers, yes, as ma'am rightly said, I was really intrigued to watch this particular webinar because of three reasons. Since I'm a 90s kid, I've always been taught and made acquainted with facts around 1947. Things that happened from 1900s to 1948 maybe, and people who were involved in the freedom struggle. But when I got to know that we are doing a webinar taking events from 1857, it really made me realize that how come we were not acquainted with 1857 and what happened exactly during that time. So that was one of the reasons I wanted to watch this webinar. And trust me on this, today while watching this webinar, I felt that while I was going through the places that Nidhi Bansal was taking us through, I was imagining what was going on in 1857, how people were fighting and doing things at the places which we visit today, but we fail to relate. And it was taking me down the memory lane, and now I'm even more intrigued to go to these places and be it Lucknow and Kanpur. When I visited Lucknow a couple of years back, it was just tunde kebab and a few more places to visit. But now I know these are the other places that I really want to visit. And the most important thing that I learned today was that everything is relevant, even though there were a few things that happened 150 years back, but the tactics that the Indians followed to bring back our freedom, like chapati movement, it sounds so naive to hear, but if you really look at the tactic they followed to circulate information through chapatis, can you even imagine that we can do that today using our cognitive abilities to that extent? So I think everything is relevant, and I'm really, really grateful to Ministry of Tourism to, for planning this webinar and at least showing this to our generation to understand how important our freedom struggle was. And we should not take it for granted. So really, thank you so much, ma'am, for picking up this subject. And thank you to Story Trails for taking us through this webinar.
Thank you, Sumega. That was a very valuable input. As she said, she's a kid from the 90s. In fact, though we are older than her, but none of us was there at that time. But that's what history is all about. And that's the value of history. We must not forget where we come from, but we also must keep adding to where we come from. And that also reminds me, viewers, to add a few more aspects as we are celebrating this special week, that in India, we have a number of places which celebrate our armed forces. Because as we go forward and remain a strong, independent country, a resurgent India, we cannot forget the role of the armed forces even today. And when we travel to the different parts of our country, let's not forget to visit some of those locations, those places that are reminders. Don't we celebrate birthdays? Well, that's the reason why we need to go to these special places, because there is something about the places. There is something that comes out when you stand at a place. Going to Jaisalmer War Museum, it brings you, as Sumega mentioned, you get transported to 1971. That what would it have been like for our soldiers in that terrain to defend their country? As they stood for us, as some of them laid down our lives, we must go and honor their contributions. So when you're in Jaisalmer, do not forget to visit the Jaisalmer War Museum, or make a special plan and go there. Encourage the forces, because that's what they are doing. They're protecting us while we can do what we are doing. Also, when in Delhi, do go to the Air Force Museum. Do go to the Indian War Museum. Do go to the Naval Aviation Museum in Goa. So many of us have been to Goa, but have we stopped by to go to the Naval Aviation Museum? We have the Samudrika Naval Marine Museum in the Andamans, and we also have the Cavalry Tank Museum in Ahmednagar in Maharashtra. They must be a part of our itineraries, viewers, because we must take our country forward by remembering and honoring and commemorating everything that has been done by our fellow citizens in different roles. When we talk about Andamans, next program, that's on Monday, the 10th of August, is going to take us to Andamans. It's going to take us to Cellular Jail. We've all heard of it, Kalapani. It's but going to remind us about the lives of Batukeshwar Dutt, Yogendra Shukla, Vinayak Savarkar, Bhai Parmanand, and so many others who were there, and how they started, just like the Chapati movement, I was reading that they actually gave up their lives by drowning in milk. Have you ever heard that? Isn't that fascinating? That you give your life by drowning in milk. That's where we're going to take you next time. But we're not only going to stop at Andamans, we're going to come back to the mainland and not forget the contributions of INA, the Azad Hind Fauj, organized by none other than Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose ji. It is often said, and I will ask Shawmi about it, that it is often said that when the British had a rethink about continuing in India, it was the military action of the INA, organized by Netaji, which actually made them think that if this outfit can launch the kind of attack in the eastern part of India with the help of Japan, then should we even be here?
That's true. I think in a popular understanding, and of course in theoretical ways also, it has been immensely written about the contributions made by Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. Coming from a Bengali blood, it is something that we have always admired. And it is not about going with one direction of ideology, whether it's non-violent or armed ammunition. I think the bottom line of every effort that was put by our freedom fighters was to attain independence. As individuals, we all have our different ways of thinking. And there were different factions in the countries who were playing up to say that who would get us the independence, or collectively, how everyone could contribute in their own way to attain it. It is true, and it is very true, during the Second World War, when the entire world was fighting against each other and INA was actually gaining the ground here in India, it was a threat. It posed a threat to the supremacy of the English, to an extent to say that, well, Andaman was free for some time under the Japanese help with Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. The flag was hoisted in Andaman. We cannot forget that. And while the British were still fighting here. So you cannot discredit of any of those efforts, because every small incident added to the larger picture. And like today, when we spoke about 1857, it is one of the first things which stirred the soul of the English rule. And they came out to say that, the East India Company cannot continue their rule, and the Queen has to undertake the entire province or the entire state of India. These are small things which kept adding. And like we mentioned, it was 1757 with Battle of Plassey, 1857, the rebellion, and 1947 when we attained independence. It's a string of events. And like you mentioned, everything added up. Yes.
And 2020, we honor that.
Of course. Yes, definitely. Why not?
At this point, I'm going to bring in another very strong, component of the Dekho Apna Desh webinar. Viewers, we are a team of people. It is never an individual's effort that brings things to all of you. And I'm going to ask the Assistant DG, Bharti Sharma, who works with me on this initiative, as to how challenging it was, viewers, to just bring to you 5 episodes. We were thinking we could do the whole 1 year, dedicating only to what are these places? What are these people? Who are these people? I'm going to ask Bharti to come in and share with you, how did we go about choosing these 5 episodes? Bharti?
Yeah, good morning. The thing is, it was when we got this idea that we have to do a series of webinars on Incredible India, and especially with the theme of independence in mind. It was like we really talked about, and a small group where we thought what topics we have to take. So the first thing that came to our mind was, okay, 1857, people are not related to that, so let's go for that. And then we looked for other landmarks, but there were so many things to cover, and it was such a difficult task. To what topic shall we take? So we thought of, okay, that's when there's Andaman, there is cellular jail, and that is one image that comes to one's mind when you think of going to, okay, this is where, think of our Indian independence movement. And same, then you go to all cities, you go to South India, East, North, West, South, there are a lot of small places, lot of incidents we are not aware of. So we thought this is a good way to bring viewers and to make them understand the importance of these places. And especially when you're visiting the cities, you have to see city from a different perspective. And then in the end, we are taking you to Gujarat, where we have Mahatma Gandhi, the father of nation, coming from. The Iron Man of India, Sardar Patel. So that's, we thought, okay, these are the places we should bring it to the viewers. Thank you.
Thank you, Bharti. In fact, viewers, it was very interesting because when we started the plan for five, we said we were starting with something that was more violent as 1857 because that was the expression of our reach for independence. And remembering along somebody like Mahatma Gandhi, who was the beacon for peace, non-violence movement. But that's the strength of all of us, right? We have the ability to move from 180 degrees of violence to moving to non-violence. And that's all that we're going to walk through in the 5 episodes that we bring to you on 10th, on Monday, this time not next Saturday, so don't forget to tune in. On Monday, 11 a.m., we are going to take you to another round of episode, which we shall take you, as I said, to cellular jail. But before we pack up for the day, I do want to remind ourselves that we must stand tall. We must stand a strong nation of strong people. The Honorable Prime Minister has recently launched with a lot of passion, Atmanirbhar Bharat. It's about discovering our strengths, viewers. Atmanirbharta does not mean shunning the world or the values that we may get from the other parts of the world. There are best practices everywhere. But Atmanirbhar means standing strong, standing tall as a country. And we therefore salute the forces that first enable it, making it happen. But each of us has a role to play. And before I sign off, therefore, I'm going to ask Nidhi one last thought on how we should develop this whole concept of museums dedicated, cities, trails dedicated to keeping ourselves independent as an option, as a traveler.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think as a country, we are blessed because we have diversity. We have everything that travelers look for, be it history, heritage, culture, food, art, architecture, festivals. It's just a matter of ourselves discovering them, realizing them, and ensuring that these products, and I call them products because this is all that we have, and we have so much of it, which needs to be productized well, which needs to be presented well, which needs to be thought through, and then taken to the travelers and showcased. And the thing that plays the most pivotal part in this entire game is the services. And that's where India City Walks as an organization always focuses on the fact that while the products exist, and like we mentioned today, these spaces have always existed and they've been existing for hundreds of years, but it's time for us to take them up in a very organized framework fashion, bringing it to the travelers, bringing it to the locals, to the residents, and delivering it in the best possible manner where people go back with life-changing experiences. And I always mention this, it's the services that make it the life-changing experiences. And that's where we need to make it a game changer. And that's where we need to continue to keep our focus. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, Nidhi. Shami, last word from you.
Yes, I think as people who are extremely well read and aware, we are trying to do this with Dekho Apna Desh, with organizations who have been in this field. I think it is equally important to understand, like today in this webinar, we mentioned about some places which are in dilapidated condition. I think when we speak about these places, the attempt through the webinars, through a platform like this, is to ensure that there is a lot more awareness. We are appreciating our culture, we are appreciating our heritage, we are appreciating everything that makes us Indian. And until and unless each one of us becomes Atmanirbhar by the fact of saying that this is the awareness, this is my neighborhood, this is my heritage. In fact, we have a program under the same name where we appreciate it. The locals have to identify this is my thing. It's my heritage, and that's how all of it becomes and fits in. We appreciate it, we become Atmanirbhar. We raise awareness, we become Atmanirbhar, and that's how the legacy will be passed on from now to another 150 years, ma'am, like you mentioned.
Thank you so much. And so once again, I'm going to take you all to Jaisalmer and say there is a wondrous milestone there. It's painted in red and it says, Nishchay kar apni jeet karu. When there, do not forget to take a picture, put it on Instagram, tell people what stern stuff we are made of, right? And let's keep this movement forward. At 11 a.m. on Monday, we'll take you to Andamans and then bring you to Calcutta and walk you the trail of how we are what we are. So namaste and thank you for joining us. Keep healthy, keep safe, See you on Monday, 11 a.m. Thank you, viewers. Thank you, Shawmi. Thank you,
Thank you,
Nick.
ma'am.